Hello and welcome to the CBB Super Show, brought to you and powered by FTN, the FTN Network, where we cover every single sport imaginable, from esports to college sports, any niche in between, pro sports, of course. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dubdeuce85. If you're new to the program, let me be the first to welcome you. What we do here is cover college basketball from a DFS, overall fantasy, prize picks, and overall betting market opportunity standpoint. What we're going to do here is break down the Super Tuesday slate, as Alex so eloquently put it there in the chat, and go game by game and basically break down my favorite plays, anyone I'm targeting from a sneak perspective, maybe guys I'm fading, what I think rostership/ownership may be. And overall, just talking about the 12 games and seeing the best way for us to attack it. At the end, I'll talk about any prize pick stuff. The prize picks board was not updated. Actually, our man Mike Randall, the leader of the tribe, is going to be going live, I think, at midnight or something. I think he's going to be going very late here on the prize picks tips. So that's exciting. I'll talk about a little bit about my prize pick stuff and then any betting opportunity stuff that's up as well. I'll be taking a trip in the morning to the DraftKings Sportsbook. So I will see what I'm able to carve out here for you guys. A nice little short 4-game slate tonight that we did pretty decently. It was low scoring. Anything to add money to the bankroll is great. Now, I didn't forget about you returners. If you guys are fans of the show and continue to support us, I appreciate you guys most of all. Please make sure that, new or old, that you hit the like button, interact with us in the chat, or if you're watching on demand, drop a comment. Those views, those likes, those comments, that stuff all helps our show become basically what it is today. And furthermore, when people type in, college basketball DFS or whatever it is that we've got tagged on there, our show will pop up and they'll be able to see us. The more eyeballs, the better. FTN Network one day, I think, will be as, a satellite radio show maybe, or maybe a network such as ESPN, and it'll all be because of you guys continuing to support us. We've come quite a long ways from the 2013, 2014 Blog Talk radio days, although those were fun. Definitely low quality in terms of production. So happy to be here at FTN. Happy to be here grinding away with all of you. March Madness is here. We are entering the conference tournament stage. Just a game or two left for most of the conferences in the regular season. Conference brackets are beginning to take shape. We are going to be covering all of those here at FTN. Speaking of Mike Randall, he already put out the Horizon League tournament, and what else did he do? There's a couple out already. Atlantic Sun, Patriot League, and the Sun Belt. I myself am going to be dropping a bunch of mid-major to low-major bracket/conference tournament breakdowns. This is going to be from mostly a betting perspective on these, but basically we're going to highlight any of the, the favorites, any value bets, maybe a long shot, and kind of talk a little bit about those. I'm, of course, a big-time Big West fan, WCC, all those West Coast conferences I'm usually pretty big on. And then going all the way to the East Coast, the MAAC, with teams like Iona and Niagara that I'm so high on. Talk about them as well. So each and every day here coming up, you're going to have an opportunity to read our breakdowns for these conference tournaments. And as always, we will have daily breakdowns of the DFS slate. It's Tuesday, so Mike Kutry will be covering the Tuesday slate breakdown. I will, of course, have my exposures. I'll have the tracker filled up, and I'll be around in the Discord helping out with player pool exposures, late news, early news, lineup suggestions, strategy talk, All of that good stuff will, of course, be talked about from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed when we tilt ourselves to a nice little bit of green screen money. All right, let's get out of the Discord so we don't have to deal with that annoying sound, and we'll get going here. All right, let's see what the skeleton PP board up now. Yeah, PP. There's not a lot. They'll definitely have more. We're going to find that, with the tournaments too, of course, especially in the conference tournaments, stuff won't be dropping until very, very late at night or early in the morning. And they're going to change very fast because as soon as they pop up, there's going to be a myriad of people either betting heavily or on PrizePicks. And they're going to move the prop market around. They're going to move, game bets, sides, totals, all that around. So you're going to want to be cognizant of when that might happen and really, truly make your sleep schedule very lean. As John Rothstein always says, we sleep in May. You don't want to miss out on the best numbers because especially on PrizePicks in years past during the conference tournament, they'll pop a number up there in the first game or two that's really out of whack, either under or over one way or another, and we'll be able to slap that. And as the day goes on before that game happens, the number just gets worse and worse and worse. So I'm looking forward to a pretty solid week or two of conference tournaments here. So let's dive in. We have a 12-game slate here on DraftKings. Going to primarily focus on DraftKings as usual. FanDuel's just not doing enough for us to warrant talking about them. That's just how it is. Although I do miss, and it doesn't seem like we're going to have it this year, again, the FanDuel used to do it, and DraftKings as well, the Survivor contest. So there'd be a 4-day one the first week and then another 4-day one the second week. And basically you just have to survive as long as you can. There's a cut on each round. Those were very popular contests. I'm not sure why they don't do them anymore. Perhaps I'll reach out to my contact there. And if enough of us, reach out and perhaps the squeaky wheel will get the oil in that case, because that is one of the more entertaining and fun contests that they offered, even more so than than Mania, in my opinion. All right, so 12-game slate here on DraftKings starts at 3:30 PST, 6:30 EST, so a half an hour earlier than the normal. Make sure you guys don't fall asleep there and forget to set your lineup or a dummy lineup. Make sure you're on the ball and not screwing around. Sometimes that half an hour earlier messes people up. There doesn't appear to be a mini X, but we do have ourselves a 3K to first $15 with just 941 people. Not too terribly high there, but still 3K to first. A little top heavy there, which those contests tend to be. However, a shot at 3K with under 1,000 entrants is interesting. You got your normal high five GPP there, the $356, and it is a bracket qualifier number 52. Running out of chances here. It's just about wrapped up. If you haven't qualified yet, this would be a good opportunity to do so. $60 buy-in, 100 entrants there. Definitely worth it. And then you'll see there are some satellites to the Slam Jam final, which is on April 3rd, which is a 222. And that is usually a pretty hefty payout there during the Final Four and final. So if you're interested in that, trying to get qualified, definitely take your shots. And there's also, of course, a plethora of other contests to jump into. Let's dive in and see what we have going on here for this 12-game slate. First game here we're going to talk about is Butler versus Marquette. We just had a very fun showing from Marquette here against DePaul. We had some shuffling of the deck happen there. We had to make some changes on that slate. Was that on Saturday? We ended up getting a lot. Saturday was a good day, by the way. We ended up getting a lot of Tyler Kolek because of some of the swaps that we were able to make because of the value coming from Wake Forest on that one. And Kolek came through in a big way, 22 points, 14 assists, 32% usage rate. The big news is the fact that Cam Jones has started to wake up here. He got banged up, was basically, so reliant on his shooting, and his shot kind of betrayed him there. He fell all the way below 7K, 3 games in a row between 6'6" and 6'8". He has pounded out 31-plus fantasy points in back-to-back contests against Creighton and DePaul, taken 12-plus shots in each of those, 9 threes against Creighton, 10 against DePaul. That's basically all he's going to do is just chuck threes. Price has come up to 7-3, so he's not nearly as appealing now, and especially this matchup on the road against Butler, which isn't that appealing at all. The first matchup against Butler, it was 60-52. Marquette won. Very low scoring, as Butler games tend to be. I'll pull up that box score so we can kind of see what we were working with in that first one. This was just a couple of Saturdays ago as well, so it wasn't like a very long time ago. This is basically what the teams have. They had Manny Bates during that one on Butler, and they probably won't this game. That's basically the only change. Tyler Kolek added 13 points, 8 assists, 30% usage rate as he does. Cam Jones shot only 5 threes when opposed to his 10 plus he's been taking. 8 total shots. They shut him down pretty well. 8 points, 3 rebounds. Oso Ighodaro, 8 points, 5 rebounds, 6 turnovers. Oliver Maxence Prosper had 10 points. Stevie Mitchell had 4. And then the bench, Chase Ross, actually, this is one of the better games he had. Played 24 minutes off the bench, 10 points, 2 blocks, and a steal. Lately, we haven't been seeing that Marquette bench between guys like David Joplin and Chase Ross and Sean Jones playing quite as much or contributing quite as much as we'd like to see. On the Butler side, Jaden Taylor had 19.7 rebounds. Seamus Lukosius had 15 points, 7 assists. Ali had 7 points, 5 rebounds. Eric Hunter, pretty well a non-factor, a couple of steals, couple of points. Manny Bates had just 2 points. Jalen Thomas off the bench didn't do a whole lot, and that was essentially it. This is a great spot for Butler, as that Marquette team is going to offer them a boost overall in tempo. The Marquette offense, which has been phenomenal this season, they're third in offensive efficiency. Defense is top 70, but we definitely see the Marquette side of things giving up a lot of points. The only problem is Butler hasn't been a very advantageous fantasy team throughout this season. They've had their moments. Jaden Taylor's broke a slate. Seamus Lukosius early in the year broke some slates. Manny Bates as chalk has broke some slates, but there isn't broken English. There is a situation here where I could see this game not panning out very well, and I think it might be a little more popular than I'm comfortable with. I think, Jaden Taylor at 7'6", that's a really high ask. Almost 8K for him. I think he's probably going to put up somewhere between 25 to 30 here. But we're taking off we're cut the head off of his value, or his upside, I should say, at that 7.6 price point. And I think that there's just a little bit maybe better ways to spend our money than 7.6 on a player like Jaden Taylor, who is good. Do not get me wrong. Butler, this is their final home game of the regular season. Seniors-wise would have been Manny Bates, Eric Hunter, Ali, normal starters, so there's not as if we're going to see any weird token, senior starters, or see a guy like Jaden Taylor or Seamus not play. I think we'll see the normal starting lineup, so I'm not worried about that in any form or fashion. But I think that I'm just treading lightly, maybe more so than the rest of the industry will. Eric Hunter at 5'3" is a prime example of somebody I think is going to be super heavily owned, but is very far from a guarantee of paying off, even at the 5'3" price, which probably looks pretty appealing. I think if people haven't been watching Butler games and they just go based off of matchup, price, and minutes, they might think that Eric Hunter at 5'3" is one of the biggest locks of the slate. And honestly, I just don't think I am going to agree with that. We saw 31 minutes against Marquette, 3 points, 4 rebounds. Like I said, he scored 14 fantasy points at the same price. He's typically been hovering around this price. He got up to 6'4" at DePaul, which was laughable, right? That's way too high. But now they drop him 1,100. He's scored 20-plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4, so he's probably technically a little underpriced for what he's been doing in the minutes he's been playing, but I'm still going to be pretty leery and probably underweight on him. His usage and shot rates are both under 17%. His assist rate's under 17%. He's shooting 32% from long range. There's nothing really rates-wise sticking out except the minutes. Like, he's on the floor, but he's perfectly capable of just, standing back and watching the action. Now, he can have his assist rate spike when guys like Chuck Harris and Jaden Taylor and Seamus are hitting their shots, but typically we're not going to see him getting on the scoring action. He did score 23 real points against DePaul back on January 4th, but that's pretty much the only time that he's hit double digits in conference, aside from a game against Villanova where he put up 10 and a game against Providence where he put up 12. Otherwise, he's really not scoring double digits in Big East play and has to rely on his peripherals, which are just kind of okay at this point. So that's somebody that I think will be pretty highly owned, and I'm certainly being very careful with. Jalen Thomas at 5'7", also somebody, with Manny Bates out, Jalen Thomas probably seeing around 30 minutes. The matchup against Marquette is good for him. I like it better than Eric Hunter because of the fact that there are so many guards and wings on Butler, and they're going to cannibalize each other a little bit. So Hunter won't necessarily rise to the top, whereas Jalen Thomas will have less competition down low with Bates on the sideline. He's going to be able to swarm the paint, get a lot of rebounds, block some shots. The only issue here with Jalen Thomas is he has had a high foul rate in conference play. You'll see there's several games in the past month or so where he's been sitting right around 4 fouls and even fouled out in one of his last 2 or 3 games. So you're dealing with a situation where, he could get into some foul trouble. He has almost a 5 fouls per 40 rate, but he is got such a good matchup under 6K. If you got to play a Butler guy, I think it's him. He has a 20% shot rate, 19% usage rate, a defensive rebounding rate of 20%, a block rate of over 6%, and a steal rate over 2%. So he's going to contribute in a myriad of ways. He has the 8th best defensive rebounding rate in the Big East, the 4th best block rate. So he's definitely getting it done. And anytime he's been called upon to start when Bates has been banged up or out, he's generally produced at a fairly decent level. The price of almost 6K, again, is a little bit high. I think he's certainly not a lock either. I think if throughout the day we start to see that he's going to be a big time, 30-40% owned guy and single entry and high dollar, I think I would really prefer to back off. And if we start hearing that people are rolling multiple Butlers players in their lineup, then I'm especially going to be underweight because there's just too many other juicy spots here. Iowa, Indiana, BC, Wake Forest, the NC State game with Duke. Of course, Nebraska versus Michigan State. We've got like the nut DBP spot there. Kansas versus Texas Tech, which in the past wouldn't be such a good fantasy-friendly game, but it is this time. We have a Mountain West game. There's just so many other targets. Georgia's on the slate. Terry Roberts owes us. So I'm not going to be stacking up Butler like I think a lot of other people are going to be doing. And that may burn me, but who in the hell wants to spend 2 of their, 8 spots in the first game relying on Butler and have the game turn out to be another, 60 to 50 type of game where everybody hits 2.5 to 3.5x, maybe 4x if you're lucky. I don't know. It'd be a different story if Taylor was still like 5K, Thomas was down there at 4 or 5. Like, I think it would make a lot more sense, but we're not getting a discount on them. And even Ali, who, has generally played pretty mediocre. He pops off for a 33 against DePaul, and suddenly they jack his price up to almost 6K. That's a pretty tough ask as well. On the Marquette side, I don't love the matchup against Butler. I just think it'll be slower for them. As I mentioned, the bench for Marquette's kind of gone way down. David Joplin's price has dropped below 5K, which at least makes him interesting because he does have such a high usage rate and high shot rate, but the minutes have really just kind of evaporated for him. We've seen Chase Ross, who spiked as high as 23 to 24 minutes at times just at the beginning of the month. Now he's barely playing 10. Sean Jones, same thing. Ben Gold, same thing. Stevie Mitchell, who starts, he's playing roughly 20 to 25 minutes. I don't like to get sucked into him because he's really just not that good. He has scored 19 plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5, so I think he might stick out slightly as a value that's adequate to some, but he is capable of just putting up like 5 to 6 fantasy points in a 30-minute game because he does a lot of corner standing, and you just don't want to play those kind of guys into your lineups very often. If anything, if you really want somebody in this game, I think Tyler Kolek is your guy. I hate to say that because he's 9-1, but he's played so incredibly well. He has high rates across the board. His assists are especially with Cam Jones hitting shots, Kolek's assist rate is just sky high. We saw that when he had 14 dimes against DePaul. If it's a close game, he's generally the one getting all the free throws down the stretch, and he's just a very, very solid option overall. But with that being said, this is a game that I'm likely not going to be going too heavily on. And when it comes to my main lineup, my Q lineup, high dollar, all that stuff, I'm probably backing away from it fully. And I don't feel that bad about it. I've done pretty good about fading Butler chalk this season, so I'll just keep doing it. All right, Florida versus Georgia. Let's start with Georgia because as a man who likes to hold myself accountable for you guys, if I get something right, I'll definitely pat ourselves on the back, but we're not beating our chests about it and making a big production. But when we miss on a play, I do like to make a little bit of a big production because it lets people know, I'm not backing away from that play. This is why I liked it so well. And, it didn't work out for us, but I'm not afraid to trust myself, my research, and hopefully you guys aren't afraid to trust that research either. Because, generally we've done pretty good together. So Terry Roberts is, of course, the player I'm talking about. Against Missouri, 29 minutes. For some reason, he shot the ball twice. Now, that's not what I expect from Terry Roberts, who generally has a shot rate of 30% and is typically taking double-digit shots every single game out on the floor. And it wasn't as if 30.6% right now, by the way, top 60 in shot rate. And it wasn't as if they were handcuffing him to this point that he just couldn't get open looks. He just literally wasn't looking to take shots, like very passive on offense. Now, he did have 8 assists, so he's deferring to his teammates a lot. And Cario Oquendo's been playing better lately. So that makes sense to me. But what doesn't make sense is the fact that he only takes 2 shots regardless, and he only gets to the foul line, the one time makes both of them. Where he generates, when he's at his best, is when he's generating points to the line, driving to the basket, taking shots, and that opens up the rest of the game for everybody else, and where he's able to have that high assist rate come into play. So coming into this game against Florida after he had 19 and a half. So at 6'8", it wasn't a killer, but obviously I was looking for 30 from him. I would have swore if we reran that, I would put Terry Roberts back on 30 fantasy points against them playing 29 minutes. Now I'm expecting him against Florida to be, not popular, but I don't think people will be scared of using him. His price is only 6.6, which is a really nice price for Terry Roberts, considering the fact that he has been over 8K and it's sometimes almost 9K earlier in the season. Now, with concussions, we talked way back in college football with Jake Kuchek about this. You're either concussed or you're not, right? But sometimes that's not always the case. Sometimes there's lingering effects. Sometimes you're a little gun shy after that. Sometimes you're still a little foggy in the head after a concussion. Now, I haven't actually I've been fortunate enough not to have a full concussion, but I've had my bell rung once in a while, right? So you can be a little woozy for a bit, and that type of injury can make you a little bit hesitant to initiate contact, which is where Terry Roberts usually makes his money, is initiating contact. He had a ton of turnovers last game, as well as ball handling and ball control were just really not there. I think he definitely bounces back here at home, going up against a Florida team that doesn't have their anchor in Colin Castleton. Now, he already played Florida once this year, back on January 7th at Florida. He took 22 shots in that game. That's more like it. He had 25 real points. He got 8 rebounds, 4 assists. He put up one of his best games of the season, maybe one of the best games of his career, 47.5 fantasy points. Certainly his best game in a Georgia uniform, maybe not in his Bradley life. So I love Terry Roberts going back to him here, because this is the last home game for Georgia. He's, I think as a COVID senior, I think he's entitled to one more year if he wants it, but we'll see. He's a little bit up there. Other seniors on the team: Braylon Bridges, Jalen Ingram, Mardez McBride. Now, Georgia, I believe, had their senior day against Missouri, because we saw Jalen Ingram start, so that and Jackson Etter. So that was their actual senior day. But still, last home game, you generally see some seniors that maybe don't play it quite as much get a little bit of a spike. But I do expect Terry Roberts to go a lot harder than what we saw against Missouri. He's just way too good not to. And over the course of his career, he's proven that time and time again. If you look at his overall efficiency numbers, he's 4th in the SEC in usage at 29.4%, 3rd in shot rate at 29.7%, 3rd in assist rate at 33.8%, and 18th in steal rate at 2.8%. He's also drawing over 4 fouls per 40. He has a top 20 free throw rate in the conference. Shoots about 72 to 75% at the line, so he's generally, semi-auto there. He's only a 30% three-point shooter, but that's really not his game. His game is to drive to the basket and either get himself to the foul line or kick it out to a guy like Cario Oquendo or Mardez McBride, and hopefully they make the shot to get us the assist. So I'm all the way back in on Terry Roberts. Yet again, I'm expecting 30-plus fantasy points from him. I know it was a rough outing for him last game, but the nice thing is with him on the floor, initiating the offense, that if he's not the one scoring, he's at least going to be getting the assist, and he'll have his finger on most of the offensive action going there. And generally, when he's at his best is when he's attacking the glass and getting rebounds as well, which we've seen him do time and time again. So I feel a lot better about him with Castleton not there. If Castleton was playing, I might be a little leery because I'd be afraid of him, taking another shot or going up there weak and getting blocked. But we don't have to worry about that so much with Castle not around. Braylon Bridges is 6.1K. Kind of like him here as well, too. I think that Florida Gators front court, just without Castleton, they're just not a very strong unit. They've got Jitaba, who's a load, but he's not that athletic. Foul trouble is always the case for him. And I think Bridges is a guy that could definitely use his veteran presence and his craftiness to have a big game. Now, he was pretty good against Missouri, 12 points, 10 rebounds, 5 of 5 from the field for 26.5 fantasy points. He's definitely solid there. Last time against Florida, he wasn't as good, just 10 and 5. But again, that was, a different looking Florida team there pre-injuries. So I like Bridges quite a bit. Also, I'm rolling Roberts in my main, but if I want to rotate through some others and get exposure here, I think Bridges makes a lot of sense. I think Justin Hill has been okay throughout the season, but even at 5-1, you might be tempted to use him. I kind of feel like he's an okay play, but I think we can back off him. That's one I think could trick people because he'll likely be back in the starting lineup, back over Jackson Eder, who got the token senior day start. Hill is really just the best when one of Cario or Roberts is out. He's just fading back into the background when those two are healthy. So I don't think Hill is very good play even at 5-1, just because minutes wise and usage aren't going to be there. Cario Oquendo back to 4-9. It's tough. It's really tough with Cario because he's really cheap. We know his shot rate's going to be astronomically high, but 34 minutes one game, 17 the next, 25 the next. It's just the minutes are always fluctuating. He didn't start last game because of the senior day stuff as well, so I would expect him to start here. But man, even at 4-9, it's really hard to trust Cario as well. And the scary thing is, Terry Roberts was mediocre last game, and Cario also very mediocre. And they got their bells rung, right? Missouri just ran away with that game. So I like Cario to bounce back if he plays 25 plus minutes, but he's even at 4-9 more of a GPP play only to me. I'm really looking at Terry Roberts still over all of these guys. I always have to mention my man, Matthew Moncrief. Minutes just, fluctuate for him, of course, 4-4. One of these days, he's going to pay off. I tell you what, one of these days. And then the other guys are back down to super cheap, that their prices went up when Roberts was out. Mardez McBride sitting there at 3-4. He spiked back up and played 28 minutes against Missouri, got the start there, hit some shots. He's mainly just a gunner. He's sort of interesting there. We know Jalen Ingram just got the, like I said, senior day start, so he's really not that interesting. Jusan Holt, his minutes have really just disappeared after playing mid-20s for, most of February. So can't use him. Ador Rahim, he's kind of locked into a 20-minute role, but his upside just isn't there even at 4-3, although I do think the matchup suits him pretty well. And that 4-3 price, if you're desperate for value, it can work, but most of these guys are very low-end options, I think, at this point. The Florida value is much more appealing because of the actual matchup being better for them. So Terry Roberts is our guy. We're riding with him, and if I think he's going to be low-owned, I'll stick the posh label on him because he will carry us. Now, the Florida side, this will be probably a popular spot to target as well, just because they're all super cheap, right? Kwesi Reeves at 4-6. I like that. If he gets 20 minutes at minimum, 20 minutes off the bench, that's a really good spot for Kwesi. He can definitely use his athleticism to befuddle some of these Gators guys. We have seen him play 22 plus minutes in 3 of his last 5. He scored 17 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 5 as well. So Reeves is generally the one that gets forgotten about because he doesn't start and he sometimes has his minutes fluctuate, but you look at his last 5, he has definitely been in the game and contributing quite well. Miriam Jones sitting there at 4-6, played just the 18 minutes against Vanderbilt, but you never know what you're going to get with him. He goes through these stretches where he's completely unstoppable, scoring, 25 to 30 fantasy points. And then he goes back to, just shooting 1 for 7 and standing in the corner. So he's a little bit risky, but 4-6, at least, he has GPP upside because he definitely can get hot. And if he gets hot in the right situation, this would be a big game for him. And I don't think people are going to look too much to him because Quasi Reeves is cheap. Kyle Lofton is still pretty cheap at 5.5, even though he doesn't really move the needle for me too much anymore. Will Richard is sitting there at 5.1, which is actually probably my favorite play from Florida this time. The Belmont transfer, he has a game log that's pretty unappealing overall in the last maybe 2 weeks. So I would hope that would bring his ownership down, but he's going to likely play 28 to 32 minutes here and be a big time factor. Against Georgia the last time, he had 14 and 9, 31 fantasy points. Really cheap tag for him. This is a kid that's been up over 6K for a lot of this season. So I'm liking the 5-1 spot for him. The matchup is great. He is one of Golden's guys, and we've seen him, with the revolving door of starters. Sometimes it was Trey Bonham and Alex Fudge, and then it was sometimes Marion Jones and Quasi Reeves. And now we got Riley Kugel going ham. But the one constant there, besides Kyle Lofton, has been Will Richard. Will Richard's been a pretty steady presence. And I should say Kyle Lofton's not a bad play here. He has scored 21 plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5. But, with him this season, he's been very average, not the St. Bonaventure version of himself. But I don't hate using him at that price. Riley Kugel at 6.1. He's still a strong play, even though his price continues to climb. You see him just continuing to shred. 24 real points against Kentucky, 20 real points against Vanderbilt. He has shot 12 plus shots in 4 of his last 5. Excuse me. So I like Riley. I think he's fine as a main team play or as a GPP option. The 6.1 price, it's a little high, but the way he's playing, the minutes he's getting in this matchup against Georgia just suits him very well. Look for him to continue to produce at a fairly high level. Alex Fudge not getting enough minutes, but in 15 minutes, Fudge is good enough to smash this Georgia team. So I like the obligatory, GPP throwaway spot for Alex Fudge, but we can't use him right now. Jason Jitaba has been the value guy that people have turned to. I really was just off him because I know his athleticism isn't that great. He's a big dude. He can barely get over 20 minutes without getting into major foul trouble. 4.4 is now his price. I like the fact that they brought it up a bit because it'll punish people if they do go there, because he's likely going to put up like an 8 to 12 fantasy point number. And at 4.4, that's obviously not going to get it done. We saw a little bit of Alex Schmishik. He had a decent game against Arkansas. Some folks chased it, didn't do so well, came back against Vanderbilt and had an okay game, 4K. The big thing is he's played 15 plus minutes in 3 straight without Castle. So he's there if you need him. But obviously at this point, I think you guys have figured out and know that the Florida forward values outside of Will Richard, who typically plays on the wing, just aren't good fantasy options. There's just way too much risk and not enough payoff there. So keep your exposure to Kugel, Lofton, Richard, and Reeves. I think those 4 are the ones you really want to rotate around. Main team viable, I think, I know Mike would say for sure Kyle Lofton, which I'm fine with. But to me, the main team options and priority rankings would be Will Richard, Riley Kugel, Quasi Reeves, and Kyle Lofton last. All right, moving right along here to a very fun game. Jody says, got to get some rest, work 6 to 11:30 now. Yeah, man, just catch me in the morning if you got to go. I'll be around. And he says he's going right back to Roberts on the other side. Yeah, boy. Yeah, Terry Roberts is going to go off. I feel pretty confident in saying that. He's not going to struggle again. That makes me happy because we are going to probably be one of the few people in the industry, at least FTN, that's on him, because I do think people are going to shy away. All right, Iowa versus Indiana. We have ourselves a very strong DFS environment here. Iowa has been, fairly lackluster on defense. Their offense has reached now 5th in offensive efficiency per KenPom. They're playing at the 48th fastest tempo. We just saw that overtime game against Michigan State. Holy hell. What a turn of events there with Sanford and how that worked out. Big 112, 106 win for Iowa. That was tough because Philip Rabacha had a nice game, but man, he got a bad whistle, got screwed with fouls. So watching that game go to overtime while owning Phil Rabacha was very, very tough. But we've seen some very good fantasy performances come out of Iowa games. That's typically how it always is. So keep it in line and sticking with them. Chris Murray sitting there at 9.5, obviously a very high price to pay. I'm a little concerned about him going up on the road against TJD. The Big Ten, I know he's coming off of 50 against Michigan State, but once Rebraca went down, they went away from Rebraca in the second half, by the way, which started causing Iowa to fall behind, and then they got bailed out with some hot shooting by the Iowa guards, and then obviously Chris Murray ended up going ballistic. But in the first half, he was pretty mediocre because Rebraca was doing everything. But I do think with the fact that the Big Ten is notorious for having a very bad whistle, I think we could see Chris Murray end up getting hosed here. Now, he did put up 51 fantasy points against Indiana at home last time, which was 30-10. So people will probably look at that and want to find a way to fit him in there, especially since he's almost 2K cheaper than TJD. And I don't mind that, but like I said, I just feel like on the road here, he'll be the one that gets victimized from a bad whistle. 7K for Phil Rebraca is a price that I would much rather play. I don't know that I will get to him, but he also had a nice game against Indiana, 19-10, 37.5 fantasy points. He just seems like such a mortal lock for 30 fantasy points at the 7K price here, even on the road. And he's just a really solid, I think, all format play. Maybe not the top end upside you need to win a large field GBP, but certainly not somebody that at this point is going to torpedo your lineup. Tony Perkins has been ridiculously good lately. He's really turned into an amazing player. 51 against Michigan State, which has caused his price to go to 7-1. I think I'll get away from him at that price. That's buying way too high. I haven't really been using him at the upper 6K price, and I just feel like this is an okay matchup. Indiana's guards certainly aren't as good as they've been in the past because of injuries. But I think on the road here, Perkins he's going to see a little bit less action than he did against Michigan State in terms of shot attempts. And he's certainly not going to grab 9 rebounds against Indiana. So don't look for him to put up 57-1s, paying a little bit too high there. I think he'd rather just pay for Rebraca or go up to Chris Murray. Now, the McCaffrey guys know. Aaron Eulis at this point, who had been an adequate value, his minutes are getting jerked around. He's pretty much out, even at 4K, which is a nice price for him. He's just not getting enough minutes and not doing enough. Probably needs to see an injury before he becomes relevant again. However, Peyton Sandford is starting to heat up shooting-wise. Last year, I'd always try to throw out the 3-5 Sandford and hope to get like 15 minutes, and he proved himself a capable rebounder, a capable shooter. Well, he's, like I said, starting to heat up a little bit here. Against Michigan State, he was especially hot, 6 for 10 from downtown, 35 fantasy points. They drop him to 5K here, which is a little puzzling. Should have obviously gone up. He's been around 6K for a lot of this season. Now we're getting a steep discount. He put up an adequate 21 fantasy points against Indiana last time. We wouldn't need much more than that, 20 to 21. He certainly can do that playing around 25 minutes. So Sandford at 5K seems like a pretty strong play. Just, again, maybe not the top end upside to win you a GBP, unless it would go to overtime. I don't think we're seeing him hit 35 or something like that, but around 20 to 25 fantasy points seems pretty likely. So I like Sandford. I like Rebraca. I'm okay paying up for Murray. I don't know that will be in the cards for me, but I certainly don't hate it. Now, on the Indiana side, I know I might be in the minority here because I usually don't like to pay up for guys, but I just don't know how. And I know against Michigan State, he technically let us down 33.5 fantasy points at almost 12K against Michigan State. I know. But I think I'm paying the 11-2 for him here against Iowa. We just continue to see Iowa give up huge fantasy points to multiple positions, but a player of TJD's caliber here at home This is going to be an atmosphere that is just totally crimsoned out. There's going to be a lot of excitement, and we're going to see him put up a big score. He put up 50 against them last time. I think we see him kind of close in on 60 here. I think we see him fed the ball a lot. I think we see him get back to business with his scoring ability. Maybe some block shots, although Iowa likes to settle for 3. So we'll see what happens there. But I'm really considering the 11-2 price point for TJD because I just think this matchup is too good for him. I don't know how he doesn't hit 60. There's going to be some foul issues maybe, but look at what Iowa continues to have happen to them against just all their opponents, right? Malik Hall, who has been pretty sporadic this season, he played 35 minutes against Iowa, put up a really solid 16 real points. We saw the guards for Michigan State shoot lights out. Joey Hauser as a mid-range shooter, he was crushing them. It's just a continuous thing that happens against Iowa. We saw Tyler Wall, who had been kind of struggling. He got right against them, 13 rebounds. Connor Esigan scored 17. There's just so much fantasy goodness that you can have in this spot. When Iowa lost by 20 to Northwestern recently, Boo Buie had 23 and 8. Ty Berry, who's been struggling with his shot, had 16, 3 and 3. It's just a good right spot for anyone struggling. And I guess we could say that TJD with back-to-back 30s, which for anyone else would be a great couple of games. For him, that's a struggle. Look for him to get back to the 50, 60 point mark. 60 fantasy points is my prediction for him. I generally don't put that out there and say this guy's going to score this much, but I do think Terry Roberts is going to score over 30, and I do think TJD is going to score over 55. So those are two guys I'm looking at extremely heavily. Now, if you're not there and TJD is not in the cards for you and you can't fit him, generally in a matchup like this, you probably want to go down and get somebody else, whether that's Jalen Hood-Schifino, that might be chasing a little bit, although we just witnessed the Spartans guards absolutely shred Iowa. Akins was hitting shot after shot. Hoggard was making all of his shots. The big one that I could see Hood-Schifino playing like would be Tyson Walker. Tyson Walker was hitting threes. He was getting to the line. He was hitting his jumpers. He was phenomenal. 31 real points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. I could see something similar for Hood-Schifino. So if you're not looking to TJD, Hood-Schifino would theoretically be the guy because he's going to be taking a ton of shots here regardless. And there's also plenty of opportunity for both of those guys to break the slate. You're just getting a big discount if you go to Hood-Schifino instead. Everyone else for the Hoosiers is pretty cheap. Race Thompson, who played 27 minutes last game. We're seeing Race minutes, they're pushing towards 30, so my man Race is really playing a lot, but just hasn't been the same from all those injuries and missed time. He's not really a threat to score 20 fantasy points right now, but that 5-1 price at this time last year would have been the biggest lock of the season. Trey Galloway was hot last game, also contributed in other categories besides scoring. He put up 29, sitting there at 4-7. That is definitely a chase. He's going to play minutes. We'll definitely see Trey Galloway be on the floor for 30-plus minutes. And the nice thing, like I said, is we just witnessed the Spartans guards hit a ton of threes against Iowa. They weren't closing out. They were very lazy on their rotations. So there is a bit of merit to chasing Trey Galloway, but the fact of the matter is don't look for him to rebound or get assists like he did against Purdue. And if he goes cold like he did against Illinois, shouting 1 for 6, he could really have a bad game at almost 5K. So he's not quite a lock that maybe I think people are going to talk about him tomorrow and say that, Galloway's my value core play, blah, 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 whatever. He's very, very risky. And you're going to find that in a lot of these values, they're definitely risky. Miller Kopp at 4-5. This is a matchup that he can exploit with his three-point shooting because he does get hot from time to time. We saw him hit 3 of 7 against Purdue, 2 of 3 against Michigan State, 4 of 5 against Illinois. He's definitely hot right now. Doesn't offer a ton of other stats, so he's going to have to rely on his scoring. But at 4-5, it's certainly possible. And then I think, you'd be really digging if you were like Malik Renew or Jordan Geronimo. None of those guys really that interesting anymore. We haven't seen Tamar Bates play enough minutes to be that viable. I thought he would be a lot better at this point. CJ Gunn had a stretch where he was playing minutes. So really nobody outside of the, Hood Schifino, TJD, and then if you want to take a shot on Galloway, Copper playing a lot of minutes. And then if you want to buy into Race Thompson being so cheap at 5-1 and you think he's going to put up 20 plus, it's definitely possible. He put up 18 against Iowa last time, but he only played 10 minutes in that game. So a big-time fantasy score in just 10 minutes. As the lock approaches, I may end up talking myself into Race because I'm such a huge fan of his, but he just really has been a forgotten man. I think here, let's say this. If you're off TJD, then Race Thompson is got to be in your lineup. I think that's the way you got to play this year. All right, moving on to the next game. There's a lot of fantasy goodness in this one as well. Boston College versus Wake. What is up, Corey? Corey's Gym, Arkansas's finest. He is he got me to do the Arkansas call last year. We'll have to make a bet this season and do that again because nobody on this planet could get me to do their piggy thing except for him. So good to see you, Corey. Glad you could make it. I know it's late for you out there. Appreciate it. All right, next game here, BC versus Wake Forest. This is one that is, Wake Forest is sliding right now. They were playing so well. My man Steve Forbes had the look with Tyree Appleby as the next, from semi-role player to conference player of the year, but it's really the wheels have fallen off for him here, and now they're probably going to struggle to make the NIT, which is a damn shame. Boston College, not the best season for them, and with Earl Grant, but there's a step in the right direction, and they have plenty of freshmen who I think are going to be really, really good in the next couple of seasons. Last time these two teams played, it was an absolute blowout. Wake Forest won 85-63. Appleby had an okay game, 17-7, 3 steals. This was during the stretch when Cam Hildreth was making us a lot of money, crushing his 16.5 PRA, and nobody was rostering him at 6K in DFS, and he was putting up big numbers. He had 20 points, 6 assists, 2 rebounds, 2 steals in that game. Andrew Carr had 21 and 13. Damari Monsanto was a non-factor, and he's obviously out now. Matthew Marsh and Bobby Klintman both had fairly decent games for the fact that Marsh played 10 minutes and had over 7 fantasy points. Klintman played 22, had 9 points, 4 rebounds, and assists. Boston College side, Maul had 12 points. Jaden Zachary had 14. DeMar Langford, a non-factor. Prince Oligby had 8 points. Quentin Post was relatively a non-factor. Chase Kelly started to play in big minutes at this time. He hasn't been a big fantasy point per minute player, but I do have Chase Kelly pegged as a starter for them next year and a big time player. So I like to throw those guys out there. But let's look at Wake Forest first. We know Monsanto is out. What got us colic on that secondary slate last weekend was the fact that we made some adjustments. I wasn't initially planning on playing 2 Wake Forest values, but as I started looking at that slate more. Notre Dame, obviously, their front court can't handle aggressive bigs. The fact that Marsh is a 7-footer, Klintman is damn near a 7-footer. Both are going to play relatively big minutes, I would have thought, and they did, except Marsh only played 17, but he still was fine. Klintman, 35 minutes, 10 points, 12 rebounds, 2 blocks. Have to love Bobby Klintman. He is looking really good for them. And then Matthew Marsh, the 7-footer, in 17 minutes, 7 points, 5 rebounds, and a block. So he was fine for his price. They ended up playing Davion Williamson a lot off the bench, 26 minutes. He, of course, did very little in that time, which he often does. And then we also saw Lucas Taylor play 18 minutes. Zach Keller played 2. Now, Taylor was a guy that I was not expecting to end up playing all that much because Wake typically, even with an injury like that, hasn't really gone into their bench, and Taylor wasn't a guy that really even played at all. He had a ton of coach decision, did not play coach's decision, and there was really not a lot of room for him. So seeing him play those minutes was interesting. I do think in a tournament atmosphere at 3-2, if we think he's going to play 18 to 20 minutes, he's certainly in play. This is a great matchup for him. He had a couple of triples. He had a couple of rebounds. I think he's okay. Now, don't get caught up in trying to use him in your main or anything, because he very easily could end up playing like 5 minutes or not at all. So he's not a factor whatsoever for main team lineup. Davion Williamson, same thing at 4-2. I don't care that Monsanto's out. Even with 26 minutes played, he put up less than 10 fantasy points. He put up 13 in 24 minutes against NC State, 7 in 24 minutes against Georgia Tech. Like, there's really just no reason to use him. He had 8 fantasy points last time they played BC. So don't be fooled by the 4-2 price. Davion Williamson just isn't very good. Don't need to be on your DFS radar in any format. Bobby Klintman at 5-4 is my number one play. You'd think maybe the price increase I'd be off, but no. I think playing 30, 35 minutes, he is really, really good. He should have been playing more earlier. I'm not just saying this from the one game against Notre Dame. We saw him have a strong game against Georgia Tech. We saw him have a strong game against Miami's front court, which you don't typically see Norchad Omier get bullied around, but he had 12 rebounds with Norchad on his hip. Very, very impressed by that outing. I think Klintman is a strong play in all formats. We saw him get shut down by the Wolfpack, and he had 4 fouls in 20 minutes, couldn't get it going. Alex's Wolfpack did a nice job there on him. But Klintman is our main team option here all the way. He's not going to impress you with his rates, but the opportunity is different now. His usage and his shot rates are both under 15%. However, his defensive rebounding rate is approaching 20%. His block rate is approaching 3%, and he's knocking down 40% of his triples on 56 attempts. So you have a guy here. He's from Sweden, so you got this Euro big playing that style of basketball that is so important right now, being able to not only hit the glass down low, but step out and knock down threes. And he is actually the number one in ACC games only, the number one 3-point shooter at 50% on 38 attempts. So he is definitely lethal out there, and it's difficult for more traditional big men to handle that kind of opposition. So I really like Klintman here. The only thing is, Quentin Post on the other side, he's capable of stepping out and hitting those shots too. So he can, keep up with Klintman to a degree there. It's kind of an interesting matchup. I'm actually looking forward to watching this game, but I think Klintman at that price of 5-4, even though it might feel a little high initially, it's a strong play if he's going to play those minutes 30, 35 and at home. Matthew Marsh at 4-6. I'm not going to pair them this time like I did on that secondary slate, but Marsh playing even 20 minutes at 4-6, there's no reason to think that he won't pay off 4-6 and put up around 17 to 20 fantasy points. I think the matchup with BC is just fine. He didn't play a ton of minutes there, just 10, but he had almost 10 fantasy points. The problem with him last game against the BC was the fact that he was in early foul trouble, which cost him a lot of playing time. I think he would have ended up playing more. But with the emergence of Klintman, I think we're probably going to see Marsh still be around that 15 to 20 minute mark. And a lot of that has to do with conditioning too. I just don't think he can handle a lot of minutes right now. Andrew Carr, he's also one of those kind of Euro bigs, that style of play, I should say. He's able to step out and hit 3, shooting about 33%. And I don't mean he's like actually from Europe. I just mean he plays that way. I think he's from Pennsylvania. He has put up 20 plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5, including that 11, 7, and 3 block game there against Notre Dame in 35 minutes. Expect him to play mid-30s minutes, so at 7-1, he's absolutely in play, and he had one of the better games against BC last time, as I mentioned. 14 shot attempts, 43 fantasy points. He actually, during that stretch, put up 38-plus in 3 straight games against FSU, BC, and Clemson. So somebody that the industry and the basketball world in general, just except for junkies, doesn't really talk about, doesn't look at, and doesn't use. He's rarely ever highly owned. And you can utilize that information to get him into some of your large fields. I don't know that I'm comfortable using him in my main lineup, even though he was so good against BC last time. But I think that he makes a very sneaky tournament play that is capable of breaking the slate and putting up 40+. And like I said, minuscule amount of people will actually be on him. And then you, of course, have Tyree Appleby at 9-4, a luxury play, but will certainly flirt with 40 fantasy points in this matchup. And then Cam Hildreth, who I haven't talked about quite as much the last month of the season. Still, I'm a big Cam Hildreth guy. He made so much money for us during January. It's hard to be mad at him, but definitely the amount of tape and film on him now, the scouting, parts of these programs have kind of semi-figured him out a little bit. He needs to definitely work on his game in the summer and add more skill sets because he's been solved a little bit. He had 32 against Miami, which was really, really exciting because that's a tough matchup at Miami. But he's kind of, fallen off a little bit here. And you'd think the opportunity with Monsanto out, a lot of shots opening up, that he's going to be able to step up and do some damage. He did have 35 against BCU last time, hit 7 of 12 on his shots. So I certainly like him. He's another guy that I like for large field GPPs just because I don't think people will be looking his way. I think Klintman and Marsh will be more popular, and then we'll see how Appleby stands out. As it is right now, I think Appleby probably goes lower owned because, look, Chris Murray, TJD, Flipowski has, not the greatest matchup, but going up against NC State, he's going to shoot like 20 times. Jalen Wilson is always a solid option. So there's some really nice pay-ups here, and you're not probably going to have the luxury of playing a Tyree Appleby. So you can use that information to, again, get some nice, large field GPP looks out of this Wake Forest team that I think people are going to maybe overlook a little bit besides Klintman and Marsh. Boston College side, they're all under 8K, so that's nice. You actually have a lot of viability here, and I think Post at 7-9, who didn't have the greatest game against Wake Forest last time, is definitely in consideration, and he's been pretty lackluster lately as well, and lackluster for him is 20 to 25 fantasy points, so still scoring a strong amount, playing a big amount of minutes. He took 14 shots against Virginia. It's a tough matchup, so you got 20 fantasy points against Virginia. It's probably 30 against everybody else. He took 11 shots against FSU, 21 and 6, had 32.5 fantasy points. The big thing with Post, he still has some foul issues here. Looking at it on the road, we could see him get into some trouble, but I trust him more than I trust the more inexperienced Bobby Klintman and Matthew Marsh. So I do think Post could have a really nice offensive game here. I do worry a little bit about his rebound total here on the road, but I think he could end up scoring 20 real points. Doesn't have to do a whole lot more other than that with his peripherals to make 4X. So have Post in your player pool. Guys like Mekhi Ashton Langford at 6'7" is a no. I'm almost never playing Jaden Zachary, even when he projects well or is popular. I don't really like him. TJ Bickerstaff at 3'7" has played his way completely out of contention. It's crazy to see that his minutes are just gone. He has random games where he'll play 15 minutes and pay off this 3'7", but you're really taking a risk if you use him at this point. There's 3 values on this team that I do not mind taking a risk with, and it's not necessarily main team, although I think you could use a couple of these guys in main team, but they're worth getting into large field tournaments. It starts with Prince Aligbe as guard forward eligibility at 5K. Going to be a future stud. He hasn't looked all that great lately, but his price at 5K is interesting because he's typically going to play about 20 to 25 minutes at worst with the opportunity for more. He has a very nice rebounding rate. You've seen he had 7 rebounds in 3 of his last 5 games. He is a guy that I just think makes a lot of sense in large field at like 1% ownership because he is capable of putting up a big score, and he has really strong overall rates, 22% shot rate, 22% usage rate, 18.6% defensive rebounding rate, and a steal rate approaching 2%. So he's interesting. Devin McLaughlin has been playing pretty well. This is another, freshman. Usage rate at 20%, a offensive rebounding rate of 11.2%, and defensive rebounding rate of 18.4%, and a block rate of 5%. He's also shooting 78% from the free throw line, 56% on his 2s, and 45% on his 3s. So a very efficient player to this point. Had some starts, got a little bit of swagger to him now. He's got some experience, and now he's playing extremely well in this mid-20s, secondary player role. He has scored 15 or more fantasy points in 3 of his last 5. He has played 21 or more minutes in 4 of his last 5, which includes a strong 28 fantasy point outing against FSU just last week. So I think with 20 to 25 minutes at 4.8, he has to be in consideration. It's a higher price for him as he's been in that 3 to 4K range. Now you're paying almost 5K, but he's definitely in play, and I will certainly have some shares. And I'm still not giving up on Chaz Kelly. He's one that I'll be stubborn on and throw him into builds. He's just getting minutes. He's extremely raw, but he's playing a ton of minutes off the bench. In the last 5, 31 minutes, 23, 26, 18, and 18. Gets a pass for the Virginia game. He played 18 minutes. That's a very tough defense to go against as a freshman. FSU's athletes bothered him, so he didn't do well there. But in 26 minutes against Pittsburgh, he had 16. 23 minutes against NC State, he had 14. 31 minutes against Virginia Tech, he had 28. His minutes have they've gone up in conference play. Grant's looking to him more. He has actually a pretty solid on-ball defense when you watch games. And I think that's why he's starting to earn more minutes. And the rest of his game will start to come around offensively. Like I said, a freshman, but he's been really solid, shooting about 30% from long range. He has a block and steal rate about 2% each, 17% assist rate. Things are coming around for him. And like I said, he's just playing. He's on the floor, playing 20-ish minutes at 3-4 in this matchup against Wake Forest, which is going to be fun for DFS. I think we're looking at a probably fairly high-scoring game where Wake Forest is in the 80s and then BC, who's better than that last matchup they were in, probably scoring somewhere close to that as well. I think you want to sprinkle around different exposures to some of these options that are going to be 1% to 2% owned, because if you hit on one of them, you absolutely could bank and take down a large field GPP. All right, speaking of Virginia and ugly games, Clemson versus Virginia next on the slate. I was kicking myself for getting away. I didn't have time to do CSV with the Clemson slate against NC State, and I ended up not using any of them in my lineup. I was kicking myself. But it ended up being such a blowout that the second half, they kind of let up, and it didn't end up as bad as it could have been. Like PJ Hall and Hunter Tyson both ended with 30. But the way it was going, it looked like they were both going to hit 50. So fading them didn't hurt after all. Chase Hunter continues to be just an absolute machine. Another 26 fantasy points there against a tough NC State team. He scored 19 plus in 5 straight. Really like Chase Hunter. He is a dime dropper, of course, but he's also banging triples with reckless abandon, hitting them at a high rate, going up against Virginia. There's definitely going to be a need for Chase Hunter to shoot the rock. I think GPP-wise, this is where he can step into play. He's mainly been a cash guy or a main team play because of his high floor, lower ceiling. But in a lower scoring game here, I think he could actually pan out in tournaments and put up a big 30, 35 fantasy point score. But he's certainly not a main team play on the road to Virginia. I think we don't want to get too cute. Hunter Tyson at 8-1 and PJ Hall at 8K. I just assume them have bad games, so those prices fall even further. Value-wise, with RJ Godfrey, Ian Sheffield, Dylan Hunter, Alex Hemingway, Chauncey Wiggins, those are all just too cute plays. I think we can probably just back out of it and not use Clemson, even though I obviously usually love Clemson each and every slate. The Virginia side, it's been kind of hot and cold with them lately. They've really dudded out on some DFS slates, but we're looking at some chatter for Jaden Gardner sitting there at 6'6", 27 fantasy points against Notre Dame, 30 against Boston College, and 41 against North Carolina. 8 points, 12 rebounds, 16 points, 5 rebounds, and 19 points, 12 rebounds. So Gardner's stock is going back up, and he's had some real strong games since the calendar turned to 2023. Last December, late December, he really fell off and wasn't even playable at 6K for a while. Minutes went away and everything, but he's starting to play more. He's taking a lot of shots. He's looking very, very confident and comfortable, but I do worry about him as major chalk on this slate. I have my serious concerns about everybody for Virginia. They've not been an easy team to target this season, honestly. And if they're able to kind of grind this game down to a halt, as they typically do, there's going to be less and less opportunities for Gardner to shoot, 15 plus times. So, and obviously with Armand Franklin still out there taking his fair amount of shots too, there's just not a lot of opportunity on a game-to-game basis for an offense like Virginia. So I'm a little bit lower on Gardner than probably the rest of the field would be, because this could be a game where Franklin pops off, of course. He's down there at 5'8". He's kind of interesting. My man Reese Beekman is always interesting to me. He's 6'6", but he's kind of locked into that 18 to 20 points. Not a whole lot of upside there otherwise. K.A. Clark, I'm never using. You guys know at this point I'm happy to fade him each and every slate until he gets to 5K. Ben Vonderplas has been okay this season, but 5'9" is a little bit too high for him as well. And then Isaac McNeely is the sneak value that I've kind of been pushing a little bit lately, but they've jacked his price all the way to almost 5K. No point in using him here, but he has taken 14 shots in his past 2 games. He's taken a 10 triples in his last 2 games as well. I had mentioned they put a lot of time and effort into developing his shot. So he's going to play minutes, and when he's out there, he's going to shoot shots. So you have seen that the last 2 games. He hasn't connected with a ton of them, but those will start falling. And when they do, he's going to absolutely shred his value. It's just unfortunate that we don't get him at 3.8 like we've been having him. It's 4.8, which makes it very difficult to justify that price as of right now. If it was a high pace matchup, I think I could still get away with it, but at this point, no. So main thing you got to ask yourself is, do you want to heat check Clemson against Virginia, or do you want to follow the crowd and play Jaden Gardner when he could potentially put up a major dud? I don't know that I see him putting up 40 here, but he's 6'6". He doesn't need to put up 40. He could put up mid-20s, low 30s, and you're feeling pretty good about it. So I gotta sleep on Jaden Gardner and see how that feels and work it out. But as of right now, the heavy chalk that I'm seeing on Gardner, Butler guys, probably Chris Murray, and probably Bobby Klintman. I'm really only going to be high on Bobby Klintman of those guys that the rest of the industry is on as of now. All right, moving on to the next game, the creme de la creme of the slate. This is Alex's Wolfpack of NC State going up against the team that everybody loves to hate. Well, at least I love to hate, the Duke Blue Devils. This is going to be a definitely a fun game, a war of a game, and Duke trying to solidify their seed. Now, they played way back, at this point it feels way back, January 4th, and in that game at PNC Arena, NC State blew their doors off, 84-60. Defense, just a great defensive effort by the Wolfpack. They held Kyle Flipowski to 14 points, 8 rebounds, which is typically a good game for most people, but not for a guy that's putting up 20 and 10 a lot. Derek White had 12. Ryan Young had 11, but it was really strong defensive effort. Jarkel Joyner had 21 points, 6 rebounds, 9 assists, starting his ham ascension. Hit 5 of 10 triples. Turk Smith had 24 points. He hit 4 of 8 triples. DJ Burns off the bench had 18 points and 4 blocks, just owned the paint against them. Things have changed slightly for the Wolfpack since then. We've seen DJ Burns play a lot more minutes, and he's going to have to here again. And just, hopefully he doesn't get a bad whistle against this Duke squad, because I think he could absolutely hammer this Duke front court as long as he's able to stay on the court and get the minutes. I'm a really big fan of DJ Burns at this point, and continue to say, even though the 7.6 price, it feels uncomfortable, it's still a great GPP play because he continues to produce at a high level each and every game, regardless of the opponent. Another 34.5 fantasy points against Clemson. I mean, he keeps churning out these strong fantasy games, and I don't think that stops here against Duke unless a bad whistle betrays him. He had almost 30 against them last time. It's going to be tough to justify, I think, on the road. Turk Smith, he didn't have a very good game against Clemson. Nobody on the Wolfpack did. He's been kind of a letdown lately, and this season he's been a really good real-life basketball player, and I think he has enhanced and improved his draft stock. But for DFS and fantasy purposes, the way he's playing, which is conducive to him getting a bigger paycheck, which is great for him, has not been great for us. And he's just not a main team guy, and he hasn't been. I continue to say I feel bad not rostering him, because I think there were very few the last month and a half of last season, very few slates that I didn't just put him in as the first lock in my lineups. And I've used him probably less. Shouldn't say this with Alex watching. I played him less than 5 times this season. I feel like the audience gasps, and it's really a sad situation where it's become for Turk Smith. He's been playing great, but he's just not doing enough fantasy-wise to justify his price. He's coming down a little bit, but we need him to come down a little bit further before we really consider him. He did, again, jack up a ton of shots against them last time, but at Duke, we'll have to see how it works out. Jarkel Joyner also playing incredibly well lately, but almost 9K for him. That's going to be tough as well. Jack Clark missed with a shoulder injury. He is listed as a game-time decision. They really could use Jack Clark for this game. I would be half tempted to roll Jack Clark in my main if he does play. He's only 5'8", I would expect to see him play, 30 minutes against Duke. He has the chops to not wilt in a matchup like this. He's got the veteran presence. He can, really rally the troops, and we know he can do enough, in rebounding, assists, block, steals, making buckets if he has to. A jack of all trades type player that we love, and at 5'8", that's a great price for him. We just have to be sure that he's going to play in as a game time decision. That can always be tricky. But the nice thing is it's one of the first games on the slate, and that technically that second wave after Butler Marquette, but the first wave of games, which is really the first 6. So we'll have that information at our disposal before we have to make any other decisions, really, and see if he ends up playing. Ernest Ross, without Jack Clark, played 16 minutes against Clemson. Damn near gets a fantasy point per minute when he's on the floor. So at 3.9, he would be at least interesting as a value play without Jack Clark. I think you give him 20 minutes, he becomes a really nice play, but I think with his fouling on the road, it's probably a bigger risk than we need to take at this point. Now, you do have Casey Morsell at 6'1". If you are not like me and you've had good success with Morsell, but he's on the floor for the entire game, so that's the main pull with Morsell and that price of 6'1", but it's really, really dire if you end up using him. And it is worth noting that Greg Gant played 24 minutes in that last game against Clemson. He's sitting there at 3.5, a very cheap option. He has panned out and paid off this cheap tag for us in the past, going up against Duke, where he had 4 points, 5 rebounds, a couple blocks, a couple steals, 21.5 fantasy points at 3-1. They will also need his veteran presence there against that Duke front court. So don't sleep on Greg Gant at 3.5 as a potential main team value option there. On the Duke side, Kyle Flipowski at 9.2 is, for me, too high. Not that he's a bad play. I think, in a vacuum, as they say, he's fine. But when you look at the rest of the slate and these other high-price options, there's just no way to justify paying Flipowski's price of 9.2 when you have the Iowa, Indiana guys, when you have Tyree Appleby even. There's just, a ton of guys in the 8K range below him. Derek Walker, for example, I'm going to be, talking about a lot here in a minute. There's just no way to get to him. So I'm not for Flipowski. I still like Derek Lively, even though his price has come up, or leveled off, I should say, at 6'4". There's a little bit of that top end upside gone at that 6'4" price, but he's generally been pretty good in neutral and tough matchups, and especially good in softer matchups. So I think we can look to him. The first time against NC State, he certainly wasn't ready, as most of Duke wasn't. He's a totally different player now. So I think he's fine at 6'4". I think Tyrese Proctor at 5'4" is also solid because he's ending up playing most of the game next to Roach there. He didn't have a very good game against NC State either, so tread lightly with him, but the price is certainly right at 5'4". If anybody were to hit a 4X number for Duke, I do think Proctor is probably the most likely to do it because of his combination of playing time and overall price. He does have a shot rate approaching 20% at this point, an assist rate of 20% as well. Derek Whitehead is at 5K. He's interesting. His minutes have plateaued slightly, but he's talented. They're going to definitely need him to make plays against this NC State defense, which is turning into a not necessarily a juggernaut, but a very, very tough group to go against. I'm starting to tend to not target against NC State because of how well they've been able to contain their opponents. And Mark Mitchell at 6'2". Do I want to buy in the increase here? Mark Mitchell was the guy way back in the summer. I said out of all the McDonald's All-Americans after I watched a McDonald's game, I felt like Mark Mitchell had the chance to be the best collegiate, not necessarily pro prospect or NBA guy, but best collegiate player in his class, just because I think he's going to end up staying for a couple of seasons and turn into a really, really good collegiate player. And we're seeing splashes of that the last couple of games against Virginia Tech, 17-8 in 32 minutes, against Louisville, 13-3 in 32 minutes, and against Syracuse, 8 points, 2 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals in 27 minutes. So we're seeing him play more. Granted, easier opponents, but going up against NC State, with the way he's playing, there's no reason to think that they won't keep rolling him out there. He did play 26 minutes against NC State last time, had 21 fantasy points. Would have probably gotten close to using him as a main team option had his price still been sitting around mid-fives. 6'2" makes you think about it. He doesn't have massive upside, so he's probably not even that great of a large field GPP play. But I do think he falls into the player pool for us, and I will find somewhere to use him. I think that he's a strong option at this price. Then, Jeremy Roach at 7K, I'm good on. Ryan Young is there at 4.6 and Jacob Grandison at 3.3. Maybe we see a little bit of, upperclassmen getting some additional minutes, but at this point, it's even as values, it's tough to trust. I think Ryan Young is probably going to have to play some extra minutes here just to deal with that NC State, front court with DJ Burns there. Just his veteran presence on a young team is going to be needed. So we might see Ryan Young approach 20 minutes. And if that's the case, he's not that bad of an option at 4.6. And we've seen Jacob Grandison start to push towards the 15 to 16 minute mark. He did play 31 against Virginia a couple weeks back, and we've seen him score 15 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 5. So don't, bite your ear or thumb your nose at Jacob Grandison either, because he could end up playing some additional minutes here. I don't know if this is the senior game for them. Let's see. It might be, because they didn't start Young or Grandison in that last game. So we might see those guys jump into the starting lineup here and possibly see some additional time. But otherwise, I'm on the Wolf Pack. I'd be betting the Wolf Pack. I'd be rolling with the Wolf Pack to cover and win outright on the road against Duke. I am just all over this Wolfpack team. They're plus 7.5. Like, how easy of a bet is that at plus 7.5? And then plus 275 on the money line. Like, sprinkle a little bit of money line, but that plus 7.5. And then if you go alt spread, you're going to get 11 plus. Duke's not beating NC State by 8 plus points. There's zero chance of that happening. I think Alex would definitely agree with me on that. It sounds like I'm losing my voice. I am. I don't know what's going on in my household. We're getting sick in the house again. The kids are sick. The wife is sick, but it's not, hopefully, not the flu. I don't want to go back to the hospital, so can't be getting sick at this time. So I'm going to have to get some sleep and rest up, because I am losing my voice for some reason, and I don't like it. All right, next game on the slate, Villanova versus Seton Hall. Tend to really not do a lot with these games for either team when they're on the slate. I'm not big proponents of using them. Cam Whitmore is my guy, but he's just not going to get that 30 plus minutes. It's like Bryce Sensabaugh in Ohio State. Like, everybody in the planet, the universe, the galaxy knows he should be playing 35 minutes a game, except the actual coach of the team. It's silly. So at 6'4", it's a fantastic price for him, but the minutes just are not going to be there, and he's probably just going to put up a 3x number, which is a damn shame. Eric Dixon continues to defy logic. He has played so good. 40 fantasy points against Creighton. He put up 31 against Providence. These are tougher opponents now going up against a very tough Seton Hall front court. We'll see if it continues. He did score 19 and 6 against Seton Hall back on February 11th, 26.5 fantasy points. So at 7-3, he's absolutely in play. I will get on board with talking about Eric Dixon. I still think it's not a great overall play at 7-3, but you can't argue the production. He's right there on par with DJ Burns. Like, the price isn't great, but their production is. And then Caleb Daniels at 6'2". I said Caleb Daniels is not playable until his price starts getting closer to 6K and possibly below it. We're just about there. 2 straight under 20 fantasy point games. The minutes are still there. The shot attempts are still there. He's actually rebounding better than he has in a long time. So it's not that bad of a play at 6'2". I'd like to see him dip a little bit further, but he had 25 against Seton Hall last time on 5 of 11 shooting. he'd pay off this 6.2 price. And he was just 2 weeks ago, he was at almost 8K. So we're there with Caleb Daniels where I'm okay using him again. And then Justin Moore at 6K, just 23 against Creighton. Of course, we expected more. Drops 600 after that game. Going to take probably 10 plus shots here out of necessity. Going to contribute in other categories. I think he is main team viable at that 6K price point. If you're going for a more semi-balanced approach, which is my specialty, as you know, he is certainly near the top of the priority list, I believe, at this point in time. Whether he stays there, that's another story, but I first glance, I like him. 23% usage rate, 23% shot rate, 22% assist rate, shooting 30% from long range, drawing 4 fouls per 40. Justin Moore has the chops to definitely do some damage here. He was just coming back into it for a few games there. He didn't play great against Seton Hall the first time, but he was pretty rusty. He's definitely picked it up since. Again, I don't know if he'll end up making my main team, but at this point, he is definitely in heavy, strong consideration. Brandon Slater, no. Mark Armstrong, no. On the Seton Hall side, it gets a little trickier because there's just been such a revolving door of options, and they've had some pretty, good depth, which is worked out in real life basketball, maybe not so much to us. Now, Kadarius Richmond has a back injury, which cost him their game against Xavier. We'll have to see. He comes into it questionable. If he's out, this gives us Jameer Harris again as a value who has, come in and played 28 plus minutes in back-to-back games with Richmond hurt. Very low fantasy point per minute player, very low value option, but playing 25 to 30 minutes at 3.7, he's definitely in play. Just give me like 10 to 12, dude. I know you can do it. So looking at him at a, salary saving standpoint, the usage and minutes that comes around without Richmond goes, obviously to Alamir Dawes, who we saw play 30-plus minutes in 5 straight. He had a really nice game against UConn, fell off against Xavier, but definitely took a ton of shots, 1 for 10 from the field. Look for him to absorb a lot of that usage. As I said, Femi Odekale has taken 18 shots in his past 2 games without Richmond, so another guy, and he's sitting there at 5'4". That is a very strong all-format type play. Dre Davis played after missing close to a month, actually. I think it was over a month. Came back, played 19 minutes against Xavier after dealing with his ankle injury, and he had 20 fantasy points, 13, 5, and 1. So he is actually interesting now that he's back at 4.9. Without Richmond, if he plays 20 to 25 minutes, I think he's actually a pretty solid overall option. He can rebound. He's proven himself to be an adequate scorer. Not a lot of consistency at this current time, but he does have the highest usage rate on the team at 24.5%, the second highest shot rate, or actually third highest at 24.4%, shooting 37% from long range, has a 2.5% block rate, drawing almost 5 fouls per 40. There's a lot to like about Dre Davis if those minutes get back up there to the 20-minute mark or possibly even higher here at 4.9. I think he has an advantage over Seton Hall for sure. So that's a sneakier sub 5K play that I don't think a lot of people will be talking about. Tyree Samuel at 6'8", Casey Ndefo at 6'6". Both should do pretty well because, like I said, that Villanova front court outside of Dixon's pretty weak, and they don't have the toughness down there to keep players off the glass. And we saw Tyree Samuel. He had 14 points, 10 rebounds against Villanova last time in 32 minutes on his way to 33 fantasy points. And Defo could do the same thing. He didn't have a great game. He had major foul issues for Villanova, and it threw him off. He did end up playing 30 minutes, but it was one of those 30 minutes where he'd play like these short minutes, spurts because he'd get into foul trouble early, and then they'd play him again. And he wasn't in that any kind of rhythm. So look for him to have a bounce back as well. And he's in consideration for GBP because of his high rebounding rate that he typically has. He's proven himself to be an electric shot blocker, a good steal rate. He can contribute in a lot of different ways. Not a big scorer, but I do think he's viable at 6'6". Trey Jackson at 3.6, saw a minutes boost against Xavier to 18 minutes. He's a GPP value, maybe more so than Harris, depending on how this injury news shakes out. With Dre Davis back, that certainly takes a little bit of upside away there. And then Tay Davis, Dre's brother, played 14 minutes against Xavier. Without Richmond, we could see, this kind of still a deep rotation, but see some of these lesser known guys get some additional bumps like we did see against Xavier and the game against UConn. I still like Tay Davis a lot as a 3K super punt, but don't expect a whole lot from him otherwise. So this game has some viability, even though it's not that intriguing to me. I like Dre Davis probably the best, followed by Femi Odekale and Tyree Samuel, a little bit of Casey Ndefo. Jameer Harris is just okay, I think, regardless of Richmond's status. And then on the Villanova side right now, it's just Justin Moore for me. And I will stop saying to fade Eric Dixon for now just because he's been so good. We have another Mountain West game on the slate. We had Wyoming, Nevada. That was a fun one. Now we have San Diego State versus Boise State. Expecting this one to be physical. This is one that could potentially be a little on the lower scoring side too, like a 125, 130 type total I could see it being. The first time they played, which was the beginning of February, Boise State got blown out by 20. Not a good look there. They will be at home this time, so that helps. But Max Rice had 16. They didn't have Marcus Shaver. Shaver's been in and out of the lineup with injuries. In fact, Boise State's dealt with a ton of injuries themselves. But Max Rice had 16 points, 3 steals. The only lone bright spot there. Matt Bradley and Darian Trammell in the blowout did absolutely nothing. A lot of standing around. They both failed to secure 20 fantasy points. Nathan Mensah had 17 and 6. Lamont Butler, who was the hero of last game with his buzzer beater, had 7 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists. Kashad Johnson had 10 and 2, and then a lot of bench guys had 7 and 9. So the blowout, it just was a very unappealing game, and I think we'll probably see this one be fairly unappealing as well. Although Matt Bradley at 6'3 and Darian Trammell at 5'5 is such an appealing price to me. I really, really got to say that I think GPP-wise, I'll be very interested in that. Matt Bradley is going through these waves throughout the season where he's putting up 15, but then exploding for 30. Right now, he's in a good wave. He put up almost 30 against New Mexico, 27 against Fresno, 30 against UNLV, and 33 against Utah State. So right now, he's playing extremely well. I think this is a advantageous price that we don't want to fully ignore, and he's probably not going to project all that well. But he does have a 30.2% shot rate, a 26% usage rate, shooting 36% from long range. So can't sleep on Matt Bradley by any means. Darian Trammell, who was so hot in the non-con, the Seattle U transfer, can definitely score in a myriad of ways. He has a 23% shot rate, 23% usage rate, 26% assist rate, and a 3.5% steal rate. But he has really kind of fallen off in the Mountain West play, but he did put up 30 against New Mexico. So you saw a snippet there of how fast he can put up points. He made 4 of his 9 triples, 6 of 15 overall, 18 real points for the 30, and 21 the game before that. So he's also playing, trending in the right direction. But there's been games where he's put up 8 to 10 and disappeared completely, and his minutes up till the last couple of games had been going in the wrong direction. But he has played 25 or more minutes in 3 straight. So I'm on board with using those guys. I'd say the prices are there's upside with those prices. Now I really like Lamont Butler. He played just the 20 minutes there, but he put up 20 fantasy points. 24 against Colorado State, put up almost 30. 2 games before that against UNLV in 26 minutes, he put up 27. He contributes in all categories. The price tag was almost $6K coming into last week, and he's been almost $7K earlier this season, and now they dump his price to $4.8. I'm extremely high on Lamont Butler, even though the fact that he's not going to play 30 minutes. San Diego State is playing pretty deep. It's not as if he won't, though. He played 36 against Utah State, 26 against UNLV, 29 against Fresno. I suppose it'll depend on really how close this game ends up being. And against Boise State last time in 25 minutes, he made 3 of 7, 7 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists. That was good for 20 fantasy points. At 4.8, that's going to get it done. It's just a matter of if he's going to be on the low end 20 minutes or he's going to be on the high end of 29 minutes. I'm extremely interested in him at that price, and I think that he's just going to completely go overlooked because people aren't going to notice what he's been doing and how effective and really how important he's been to the team as a starter. So what San Diego State's doing right now is they're running 9 to 10 guys, 15 plus minutes. So not great. Starters: Trammell, Bradley, Kashad Johnson, Nathan Menza, Lamont Butler. Then we see Micah Parrish, Adam Seiko, Jadon Lede, and Agoek Arap all play off the bench. So that's their deeper rotation, which causes a lot of these 18 to 23 minute, box scores that you're seeing for guys, which takes the upside off of some. But the price tag of 4.8 from Lamont Butler is easily 1K too cheap. And he's typically, like I said, been 6K, has a 22% shot rate, has a 22% usage rate, shooting 33% from long range. His assist rate is just a tick under Trammell's at 24.9%, and he has the highest steal rate on the team at 4%. Fouls, sometimes an issue. He has a 4.5 foul rate, but Lamont Butler at 4.8 is a absolute steal. Going up against Boise State's no easy task at Boise, but come on, 4.8 for this guy's just too cheap. Boise State, they've had injuries galore, which has really hurt them. Gotta like Chibuzo Agbo's price at 5.6. He's the most playable, I think, for Boise State right now, playing over 30 minutes. He scored 19 plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5. SDSU is never a good matchup for anyone. Their defense is extremely legit, top 10 usually. And I think that Agbo could struggle because of that defensive pressure. They're currently 12th in defensive efficiency, but he's going to be on the floor for 30-plus minutes, and there's upside there because of the amount of shots he takes. He's a three-point threat, somebody that they're looking to when their offense gets stagnant, which is quite often lately. Agbo's currently shooting 41% from long range. Max Rice currently shooting 41% from long range as well. So they have a couple of guys to kickstart the offense. The difference being Agbo is only 5'6". Max Rice sitting there at 6'5" for 1K or more. But I don't mind Rice. Tyson DeGenhart at 6'5" is okay. Marcus Shaver is probably not super playable at 7'2", but big shot Shaver is going to be on the floor. If there's an opportunity for this to remain close in Boise to keep it within 5 to 6 points throughout, Shaver is going to be a big reason for that. If it turns into a game where they just get their doors blown off, then he's not going to be very viable. But he did not play in that first time that San Diego State did win. Worth noting and keeping track of that. But otherwise, the prices on Boise State guys are just honestly okay. All right, moving on to the next game, Texas A&M and Ole Miss. I hate Texas A&M slates. At this point, you guys know I say it all the time. Texas A&M slates are horrible. They continue to be a team that, DFS-wise, they're so uninteresting. Besides the, Wade Taylor, there's no consistency with this team whatsoever. But Wade Taylor ends up being the most expensive guy on the team, and he still is at 8K. The problem here is, as much as I like to, and I do fade Texas A&M all the time, they just have a really good matchup against a undersized Ole Miss team. Stop me if you heard this before. We like to target against Ole Miss because their front court's so undersized. They can, Kermit, their coach, Kermit Davis, because he's just not working out. He's struggling. He's not recaptured any of the magic that he had at Middle 10, and clearly at this point, it's just not going to work out for him. So they moved on from Kermit. Obviously has created a situation where they're kind of limping the rest of their season, and we're going to probably see Texas A&M put up a nice number here against Ole Miss and maybe push towards 80 real points. So Wade Taylor's okay at that 8K price. He has a 30% usage rate, a 29% shot rate, 33% assist rate, shooting almost 40% from long range, and he has a 4% steal rate. So you definitely can like Wade Taylor here in this spot, and if you go with a more balanced approach, paying him at 8K, he's probably going to put up close to 40 here in this spot. He definitely has that ability, and you see he continues to rattle off low to mid 30 scores in each and every matchup against a myriad of different opponents: Tennessee, Missouri, LSU, Mississippi State. You've got, easy to tough there, and he still continues to put numbers on the board. Where it gets tricky, though, is the prices on A&M guys have fallen, and that's where I'm a little upset because Tyrese Radford's an easy fade at 7.5, not as easy of a fade at 5.9. Dexter Dennis, an easy fade at 7K, not as much at 5.7. So we've got those two guys who are going to obviously probably be a little popular because they're going to project well at those price decreases and they have a fantastic matchup. And they're both going to play heavy minutes, meaning over 30 at minimum. There's just no consistency here. Dexter Dennis did show his upside against Arkansas, put up 37, 38 against Missouri. Then against the tough Tennessee, he bottomed out with 13, against Mississippi State 20. This is a really good matchup. He could definitely pay off. Radford is the one that so I could see myself eating that Dexter Dennis chalk, honestly. Radford's the one I have a real problem with. Like I said, at 7K, an easy fade. He's typically going to be around the low to mid 20s. And when you get to the 6K range, you're talking about him probably coasting into 4K. And there's upside for more because if it's one of those games where his shot's falling, he's grabbing every rebound on planet Earth and adding peripherals, suddenly he goes from 4X at 5.9 to 6X. And if he's like 40% owned, you got caught with your pants down. It's a really bad situation. So I'm really, really not happy about this Texas A&M game being on the slate because I feel like there's going to be trouble. I feel like there's going to be some major chalk bust coming out of here, but I also feel like there's going to be a highly owned player that just bursts the slate. And if you don't have him, it's going to be a real detriment to you and the rest of your lineup. Henry Coleman is the GPP special here because he's the one that will be able to take advantage fully of that Ole Miss front court. It's not been a great season for Henry Coleman, an SEC season that is. It's not for the faint of heart. 5.6 is about where he should be. So we're not getting super value at this price, but he's definitely a guy with his rebounding numbers, 10% offensive rebounding rate, and draws 4 fouls per 40, where I could see him panning out here. Now, he's not a super tall guy himself. It's not like he's 7 feet, but he definitely has the chops to win out in a matchup like this. Julius Marble, same thing. Marble, 8% offensive rebounding rate, 15% defensive rebounding rate, kind of like what Marble offers here. If he gets 25 to 30 minutes at 5.1, I think we see him put up a pretty high score. But there's, again, no consistency with him either. And this price of 5.1 is basically what he's been sitting at for the last 5 games. So we're not getting a steep discount like we are with Dexter Dennis and Tyrese Radford. Anderson Garcia has played 20-plus minutes in a lot of games since the calendar turned to 2023. And we got past January and into February. He's played 20-plus minutes in every single game in the month of February. Hasn't put up huge numbers, but at 4.3, playing 20 minutes, contributing, in a multitude of ways, whether it's rebounds, steals, he gets assists sometimes, scoring. He had a 4 for 6 shooting against Mississippi State, actually put up a 4X number at 16 fantasy points. He's okay. Looks like they're leaning on him a little bit more. He transferred over, and he's actually a pretty talented kid. He showed some real good flashes at Mississippi State last year, and he just needs the opportunity. He actually has the second best offensive rebounding rate in the SEC at 17.9%. So he's not a total stiff when he's on the floor, and he's contributing where he can. Ole Miss side, I don't like this matchup for them whatsoever. It's one that's going to really bother me. I think Matthew Morrell continues to be a really nice option at 7K. He's got a huge usage and shot rate. He was a little under a performance against LSU, 27.5 fantasy points, was still fine at 6.9, but I was expecting more. Just going to be taking a ton of shots, contributes in strongly in the rebound and assist category. I think he is certainly in play here at 7K more so, or I would trust him more so than Jamean Brakefield, who's played well. But you look at it, Morrell has a 25.5% shot rate, shooting 30% from long range, 24% usage rate. He is drawing 4 fouls per 40. Just overall, going to be this heavy usage guy on the team. Jamean Brakefield, who doesn't have the heaviest usage but is playing really well lately, has a 24% combined rebounding rate, a 2% steal rate, shooting 35% from long range, shooting 68% on 2-point field goals. Brakefield has really, really come along this season. He has the number one effective field goal percentage and number 2 true shooting percentage in the SEC, and the 17th best defensive rebounding rate in SEC games as well. So he's somebody who, to me, feels it's one of those prices where I'm uncomfortable playing it, but in DJ Burns fashion, he's continuing to pay it off. In fact, he's scored 40 plus fantasy points in 2 of his last 3, Mississippi State and LSU. And other than that, 27 against Florida, 26 against South Carolina. He's just been really solid. So paying the $7K price, while it feels gross, he's at least been, paying that number off and contributing at a high level to where he's got to be in consideration to a degree. I'd rather play Miro for the same price, but it's hard to ignore what he's been doing. And then as far as the secondary options, Miles Burns at $7K is going to be a no. We do have values in James White at 3.5, Robert Allen 4.1, Jay McGinnis at 3.8, TJ Caldwell at 3.2, but very, very low-end options that are just not seeing huge time. James White did play 25 minutes against LSU, also 23 minutes against Auburn. He went through a stretch where he was playing 21 minutes or more in late January. Then he went back on the shelf, barely played, and now the last 2 games he's played over 20 minutes. So tread lightly, but at that price of 3.5 and starting perhaps, he has to be in consideration. And Emory Abram has been the one that's victimized here. His minutes have gone directly to James White. He played 14 minutes against Auburn and 18 against LSU. He did have a nice game, though. He had 4 triples against LSU. All right, moving on to the next game. We have 3 more, and then we're all done. Arkansas versus Tennessee. Man, Nick Smith is looking like the NBA prospect that we expected him to be. I just am going to have a real hard time not just keep plugging him in. His price, thankfully, has gone up. He was 4.9 against Georgia. We all slammed him there. He killed it. He was 5.4 against Bama, which is a tough matchup, but still, it was too cheap. We slammed him there. He had taken 23 shots against Alabama. He made only 9, but still 23 attempts, 14 attempts against Georgia, 12 against Florida. Healthy, chucking, big-time scorer. GPP play all the way here at 6.3. The reason why is this matchup against Tennessee is even worse than the Alabama matchup, and on the road, I do have some serious concerns about using anyone from Arkansas. If I were to use an Arkansas guy, it would certainly be Nick Smith. His presence has made the team much better. It's also made guys like Ricky Council, you saw Council's prices drop to 6.5. His overall upside is going to drop. Anthony Black's price has dropped to 6.8 from 8K. We're seeing, the Georgia game, they all went off, but against Bama, Black played 16 minutes, fouled out during that time. Really rough game for him. His price drops. Devo Davis sitting there at 5.7. His price drops after he put up almost 30 against Bama, but the game before that against Georgia, you saw he only put up 8. So with Nick Smith around, overall, there'll be a second guy. There'll be a Robin to his Batman that does well, but it's going to rotate. It's never going to be the same anymore. It's not going to be Black every game. It's not going to be Council every game. It won't be Devo. It'll be a different guy each time, with Nick Smith being the alpha on this team from here on out the rest of the way, which there aren't a lot of games left going into the tournament. You also have Jalen Graham, who had seen some popularity over the last couple of slates, 40 fantasy points, 20 and 12, only 9 minutes against Bama. Be careful. I mentioned that heading into it. With the must bus, he'll play a guy 26 minutes and then he'll play him 3 minutes the next. So tread lightly if you're going there. 4 or 5 is high enough to back off of Jalen Graham at this point. And then the same thing with the Mitchell brothers, from 31 minutes down to 8 for Mikal. Yikes. And for Makai, down from 26 to 13. Also a yikes. So you're not using anyone against Tennessee unless it's Nick Smith. And even then, I think it's probably GPP only because I want to heat check him. But he may not make my main lineup here. And that might be a mistake. But I have to respect Tennessee at this point, defensively and at home. Tennessee side, I have just rarely, if ever, paid for Vescovi, so I don't like him here. Ziegler's okay at his price of 7.7. We do have some values. Jamal Mashak at 4.8 has been playing pretty well with Tyreek Key banged up, Julian Phillips earlier, Josiah Jordan-James was banged up, so Mashak had stepped up into a very nice high usage role. He has scored 29 plus fantasy points in 2 of his last 3 against Kentucky and South Carolina. The minutes are there for him. The price is up, but at 4.8, Mashak is still in play. We did see Josiah Jordan-James come back and play 21 minutes against South Carolina, so his presence overall diminishes what Mashak will do because that shot's being taken away in minutes. So keep in mind it was South Carolina, which multitude of people continue to rack up fantasy points against South Carolina. So I think going up against Arkansas with a closer matchup and non-blowout situation where Josiah Jordan-James is going to be asked to play closer to 30 minutes perhaps, Mashak could be the one victimized here. So tread very lightly, but he's absolutely in play, especially with Tyreek Key dealing with an ankle injury, which we know those can be really, really tricky. If he's unavailable yet again, then Mashak becomes a little safer because at the very least he'll absorb any of Key's bench minutes. We have seen Tobe Awaka play double-digit minutes in each of the last 5 games. They will definitely need him to play strong minutes when he's out there against that Arkansas front court, but I don't believe he's a fantasy option at this time. Jonas Adu is probably my favorite play on Tennessee for long-term purposes. 5.2 is just a little bit too high, but it would not surprise me to see him pay it off and put up a 20-plus fantasy point score. We also saw Oliver Nkwa put up 24-plus fantasy points in back-to-back games against the likes of Texas A&M and South Carolina. This is usually about the time he falls off, so I won't be tempted to use him, especially at 6'3", but he is going to be asked to play heavier minutes against that Arkansas front court. And then Julian Phillips, also questionable, has been out since February 11th, dealing with the hip injury. We'll see what happens with him, but at this moment, it sounds like he's not going to play. All right, moving on, we have Michigan State versus Nebraska. This is obviously DVP city here for one Derek Walker at 8.2K. Now, he has been priced in the mid-7K range for a lot of February, most of February. So it's unfortunate because he put up almost 50 against Maryland, which was a fantastic game. 23 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 blocks, and a steal. Great rates across the board. I'll still pay the 8.2 for Walker. I don't care. He put up 30 against Minnesota. Wasn't quite the score you'd expect against a team like Minnesota, but look for Derek Walker to put up a phenomenal score. I haven't really been talking about Derek Walker. We haven't had Nebraska on the slate a ton when the show is going on, but Walker has just had an impressive year, and I reference him still when I'm talking about, guys who have their assist rates dropped, and I always say it's the inverse of Derek Walker. Well, he has a 30% assist rate, which has been phenomenal. His previous career high of 15%. The offense truly running through him fully. 29% usage rate, 25% shot rate, 8.2% offensive rebounding rate, 19% defensive rebounding rate. He's shooting just almost 60% on his field goals, drawing 4 fouls per 40, block rate of 3%, steal rate of 2%. Have to love Derek Walker in all formats, main team play, core play, you name it, I'm all in. This matchup is just way too good. I always chase it. I will never stop until the season ends. Walker against Michigan State last time, Nebraska got crushed at the Breslin Center. Walker had a 38% usage rate in that one, 15 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, a block, and a steal. You would love to have seen the double-double there against Michigan State, but that usage rate is hard to ignore in that matchup in a hostile environment when the game was really over. It was a blowout. But he put up 33.5 fantasy points there. 33.5 will not kill us at 8.2, but I think he's going to put up 40-plus in this game against Michigan State. Look for him to absolutely erupt in this matchup as long as he doesn't get boned by fouls. This is the last home game of the season for Nebraska. Look out. He is cleared for takeoff, and he's going to do us right. So, will he be lower owned? I don't think so. I think people know that the matchup is primed and great and fantastic, but I also don't think he's going to be super high owned either. I think he'll be somewhere in the middle. Kasai Tominaga has been killing it And if anybody's going to use Nebraska guys, maybe it's going to be Tamanega because he's only 5'6" and shooting so many shots repeatedly, and he's making them. Best player ever right now. But Derek Walker's just primed to walk in here at home and erupt. Looking at Tamanega's stats, he has taken a crazy amount of shots. The Minnesota game, he was okay, 22 fantasy points, put up 8. But against Maryland, 17 shot attempts. Against Rutgers, 15. Wisconsin, 14. And Michigan, 16. Since Nebraska has lost 2 starters for the year and they forced Tamanega into a high-minute role, he's been chucking with reckless abandon. He doesn't really do anything in the peripheral categories, although he had 4 steals against Minnesota. That's an outlier. He's typically going to put up a rebound, an assist, and then 20 real points. So at 5'6", with his shot rate, his usage, which at this point he has a usage rate of 22%, a shot rate of 28.2%. His shot rate is the 10th best in the conference right now. He's got the 8th best 3-point shooting percentage at 41%, the 3rd best 2-point field goal percentage at 61%, and the 6th best offensive rating in the conference. So he is really, really playing well right now. You have to absolutely consider him. He's probably going to be popular. I don't mind eating that chalk, but at the same time, I also don't know that I want to play 2 Nebraska guys in my main team, and there's 0 chance I'm fading Derek Walker. That's just how it is. Sam Griesel's okay at 7-2. All the other guys like Wilhelm Bredebach, Denham Dawson, Sam Hoiberg, CJ Wilcher, not interested in any of those guys. You do have Jamarcus Lawrence, who played 30 minutes against Minnesota, has 17 fantasy points. He scored 16+ in 3 of his last 4. So at 4-1, playing 25 to 30 minutes, he's at least in consideration. He doesn't probably have the skill set needed to take full advantage of this matchup, but he does have a decent shot rate at 17% for 4-1, and he's shooting 34% from long range. And he will be set up if Michigan State collapses or tries to fully contain Derek Walker. There's going to be shots available for Lawrence to take, and everybody in the gym knows Tamanega is going to be shooting, so they'll stick their best defender on Tamanega, which could beat Walker and give him trouble. So Jamarcus Lawrence is going to have the opportunity to have a pretty solid game at 4-1 and play a lot of minutes at that. Michigan State, this is a great matchup for them against Nebraska. Tyson Walker sitting there at 6'9" after the heat show he just put on. Jaden Akins was uncanny and unconscious from long range, sitting there at 5K. Love Jaden Akins. Think he's a prime main team play. And AJ Hoggard has some upside there at 6'5". I'm not going to play the roulette wheel game for the forward. So Joey Hauser's off the table for me. Matty Sissoko's off the table for me. Malik Hall is typically off the table for me. I think he's okay at 5'2" in this matchup. He should definitely, do some damage, but how much over 20 fantasy points is he really going to do? Not that much, in my opinion. So I'll keep my ownership or my exposure onto Walker, Hoggard, and Akins. Akins at 5K just makes the most sense. 10 shots against Iowa. Hit all 4 of his triples, just red hot shooting. He's been hovering right around 20 fantasy points in each of his last 4 games. He's definitely a main team cash play, but you can also use him in GPPs as well because how cheap he is, and he does have upside. Hoggard also a main team viable play, high assist rate, high usage rate, back-to-back games over 30 fantasy points. The game against Iowa, he just kind of did it quietly because he wasn't scoring that much in the first half, but as the game went on, and of course in overtime, he showed out. He put up 31, shooting 1 of 6 from the field, got to the foul line 14 times, but high assist rate, contributes in rebounds. He's a really nice overall option at 6'5" that should probably be higher on my priority list than he actually is. But at this point, I'm looking at Akins, and I'm not necessarily looking to stack. There's very few teams on this slate that I actually want to stack, and I'm usually a pretty big stacker. I'm looking to get my exposure kind of spread out through a multitude of these different games. If any game I was going to stack, it's probably BC Wake Forest. But at this point, my biggest stacks are going to be like 2-man stacks instead of 3 or 4. Tyson Walker, 6'9". Let's just take a minute to ooh and ah at the game he had against Iowa. 45.5 fantasy points, 11 of 15 from the field. hit a couple triples, but he was just hitting fall-away jumpers and completely unstoppable. So back-to-back games, over 33 fantasy points. Heat check him at 7K. Sure, not quite a main team play over Hoggard, but he's playing extremely well right now. And the last game on the slate, Texas Tech versus Kansas. Texas Tech, they've been a fantasy-friendly unit this year, man. Injuries have happened and struggles have happened. Fardaws, Amick was major chalk on that last slate. I think with Daniel Bacho, Ailing, and probably not playing, we can go back and look to Fardaws. The 7-4 price or 7-1 price. Sorry, keep looking at the wrong guy. The 7-4 price for Fardaws is very low still. He has scored 27 plus fantasy points in 4 straight. Going up against Kansas, it's never an easy task for anyone, but if there's a matchup-proof guy on the team, it certainly has to be considered Fardaws. He has just produced at a high level at the collegiate stage year in and year out. Looking at it, he has a 26% usage rate, 25% shot rate, a combined rebounding rate of 30%, and just improving with each game. As long as he doesn't get into foul trouble here on the road, which is something I'm concerned about, I think he could absolutely pay off this price. Probably pushing him more to alt team category instead of main, but he's definitely the Texas Tech guy that I'd be more willing to own than anyone else in my main lineup. Jalen Tyson at 7-1, athletic as hell, playing his best basketball of his career right now. I always like him, but the price is a little high. He did have 31 against Kansas last time in 36 minutes, 10 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists. So he did have a good history there against them in the one game. I think he's a great GBP play as well. These Texas Tech guys, all in all, are probably going to go under-owned. And then Kevin O'Banner, 36 minutes last game, put up 31, 17, and 9. Just when you think O'Banner's, is going to struggle his way out and not be that viable anymore because of Fardaw's return, he pops off for 31, 32 fantasy points. Look out for him. He's fully capable of erupting. He did have 44 against Kansas in 37 minutes when they played back on January 3rd. 26.7 rebounds for him. He had 4 triples. He's only 6'5". It's an intriguing price point. I think he can be used in most formats. I think all the Texas Tech starters are interesting. Even Davion Harmon and Pop Isaacs, the guards, who, one of them is going to have a DeJuan Harris on them, which I don't like the thought of that because of how elite his defense is. But they're definitely in play because they're playing big minutes. So the Texas Tech starters are all very intriguing and viable options for this game. And then Kansas, Kevin McCullough, it's revenge narrative time at 8-1. He didn't play well in their first meeting, and the 8-1 price tag is certainly high, but expect him to probably play most of, if not the entire game. And with DeJuan Harris suffering some sort of undisclosed injury, we don't know how limited he could be. He's available. They're saying he's expected to be available, which that could mean anything. That he could be on the bench, available in case of emergency. He could be coming off the bench, and there's just so many variables there. He's been freaking amazing the last 5 games in conference. Just put up a 40 against West Virginia, 6 steals though, but his scoring has really stepped up. He scored 16 against Oklahoma, 17. These are real points against Texas, 14 against Baylor, 17 against West Virginia, and 18 against K-State. So taking on more of a scoring load lately, which is why his price has come up to 7.5, which to me is unplayable at 7.5. There's just too much downside to him because I don't think he continues to get 6 steals or score at this high level. But his presence alone makes everybody else so good and enhances guys like Grady Dick, Kevin McCullough, Jalen Wilson. So want to have him play definitely, but his presence hurts the Texas Tech side because he's going to be on one of Harmon probably or Pop Isaacs. KJ Adams at 6'3" is just an okay option. Played 37 minutes in that last game against West Virginia, 32 fantasy points, has actually scored 28 plus in 2 of his last 3. He's viable. 6'3" is just an okay price. He's put up some really nasty games this season. He had 27 against Texas Tech the first time. We'll look and see what his PRA is, but I think that's where I'll hit his over instead of trying to play him in DFS. But I definitely like him. Ernest Udell is an okay value for a while, but his minutes are all over the place. Can't really use him. Jalen Wilson's production has gone down. So it's funny because a couple weeks ago, I said Jalen Wilson, as far as pay-ups, he doesn't break the slate, but he rarely torpedoes your lineup. And then he comes out and torpedoes a lineup for the first time all season. He's been pretty mediocre since. Good time to go back to him with people probably off at the 9-3 tag. But he's come down 600. He's usually been at 10K. This is a great spot to go, leverage-wise. He did have 31 against them last time, so I think the 9-3 price point puts him in consideration, but he's definitely not at the top of the priority list when it comes to payups. And if Harris ends up being out, then we have min price options like Joseph Yesufu, who we all want to see play more, and then MJ Rice, who has barely been playing, but the opportunity would be there without Harris, and we've seen Bobby Pettiford be dealing with a hamstring issue. So there are some minutes available for guys like MJ Rice and Joseph Yesufu, depending on how the Harris news shakes out. All right, so that is the slate. We did it. It's a nice, hearty slate. Feeling pretty good about it, actually. I think we're going to do quite well. Some really obvious chalk spots that I'm not that comfortable with, so we're going to have some nice leverage. My core as it stands right now, Terry Roberts at 6'6". I think it was obvious. I think I'll go ahead and tag him as the posh play of the day. That's how comfortable, confident, and just feeling really good about old Terry Roberts here. I think he's going to do us just real well, do us proud. So he is the posh play of the day, core play number 1, Terry Roberts. Core play number 2 at this moment in time, Bobby Klintman from Wake Forest. I think that falls in line with the rest of the industry at 5'4". He could definitely disappoint us, like he did against NC State, but I think he's good for 20 here at minimum with upside for more. I don't know that, I'm not going to sit here and say he's putting up 34 again, but I do think 20 to 22 is something that he's going to bring in and possibly more. I like him to make value for us. So Bobby Klintman is core play number 2. Number 3 is a little bit more difficult. There's different. No, it's not difficult at all. Derek Walker of Nebraska versus Michigan State. How the hell do we not target him this DVP spot? We just got to roll it. If you've been rolling the high post against Syracuse with me, if you've been rolling the bigs against Michigan State with me, and if you've been rolling, bigs against Penn State with me half the time, we're not doing it every time, you've made a really decent chunk of cash because people either are too stubborn to realize this matchup so prime, or they're literally just not noticing it. And we're continuing to see these guys low ownership, especially the Syracuse. I don't know why, but we keep getting players in prime matchups at lower rostership. So please let Derek Walker be sub 10% tomorrow, because if he is, we are going to absolutely curb stomp some folks out there. Terry Roberts bounce back with Derek Walker domination sounds pretty good to me, and we're not having to break the bank. Together there's still an average of 5.8 salary per spot there, and we got some values to roll out. So you can definitely fit those two without breaking the bank, and their upside is massive in these spots. All right, PrizePicks wise, mentioned the board. It's pretty light at the moment, and that's pretty typical. There are 2 I like in the Mountain West game between San Jose State and Colorado State. Isaiah Stevens over 33.5 fantasy points, and Omari Moore, who is a scoring machine for them going up against this Colorado State team. I like his. It's 19 real. It's a lot of real points, but over 19 points for Omari Moore. You could also hit his fantasy total of over 33.5. He's going to score 20 plus real against this Colorado State team. He has to. I think Stevens and Moore are in for a battle, and that's going to be a fun one. And then I am really looking at another point prop here. Let me scroll back up. All right. Mark Mitchell versus NC State, 9 real points. I think something's clicked for him. He's starting to figure it out. I think he's going to be really good, and I think he scores over 9 points here against NC State. The last one that I want to look at here, PRA. I'm just going to shift down. It's almost time to go back to Cameron Hildreth. They're tempting us at 19.5, but I don't know if that's going to be my official one. Okay. It's not as great as I want it to be, but I know that it failed us, Marcus Shaver's PRA the other night, but it's still sitting there at 18.5. I know the SDSU matchup is tough, but look for Shaver to have a much better game here at home. I think this is a spot where he scores 20 real points, no threat of turnovers with the PRA, so over 18.5 PRA for me on Marcus Shaver. I am going back to big shot Shaver, and I'm not afraid to do so. So those are my prize picks for now. There'll be more in the morning on the board, though, so we'll see how that works out, and we'll update the tracker with those updated plays. Now over on DK on the prop market, let's see what we got here. Then we'll get out. Syracuse versus Georgia Tech. Damn good thing that's not on the slate, huh? Because I don't know what I would do with Georgia Tech there. Just don't know what I'd do. The Cameron Hildreth 19.5 PRA is really calling to me. I might have to go back to our guy Hildreth, but that one's on pause for right now. KJ Adams over 18.5 PRA. It's minus 130, so we might want to put it with something else, but I like him in this game against Texas Tech. I like this game in general, Kansas versus Texas Tech, to be more fantasy friendly than people probably realize. And I could see 3 or 4 guys coming out of this making 4X or more. Virginia Tech gets Louisville. I like Sean Padula's number over 21.5 PRA. It's minus 105. High assist rate. He knocks down shots. This is a matchup that he could absolutely terrorize. So we'll go over the 21.5 PRA there on Sean Padula. Derek Walker's PRA is a little high at 25.5, so I might hit some of his same individual same game parlays they've offered on DK, but he's just going to crush that matchup. Jaden Akins over 15.5 PRA. It's minus 125. The kid might score 20 real points here against Nebraska if he continues his hot shooting. So I'll take that 15.5 number. I'll take the over 20.5 PRA on Tyson Walker at minus 105. And I'll take the over 22.5 PRA on AJ Hoggard at minus 105. I think all 3 of those guys are going to have a very nice game. And of course, Derek Walker is going to melt the slate for us. Over on DK here, the Colorado State PRAs are too high on Omari Moore and Isaiah Stevens, so we will leave those alone. But let's see what the point prop is for Omari Moore, and then we'll head out of here. Mm, 19.5 there too at minus 105. Yeah, it's whatever. So that is it. That is the show. I think the prize pick show is going to be going live here pretty soon too from Mike Randall. So that's fun. Appreciate everyone's continued support. So a little bit different with the schedule this week. We'll be going live another night show this week, which will be Friday night at 9 p.m. PST, midnight Eastern. But the normal, what I would have done Tuesday night and Wednesday night shows have been shifted a little bit. Instead, I'm going to do Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. PST and Thursday morning at 11 a.m. PST. So I'll be covering the Wednesday slate the morning of, covering the Thursday slate the morning of. We're going to try this out, see if it gets, some of those sleepy, we sleep all the time, guys, and see if we get some more views in the morning and some other interactions. And overall, it'll be better for me to split it up because, at nighttime with my kids and stuff, it's a little bit harder. So we're gonna run this split schedule, half night, half morning, and see how it works out. But I'm excited. We're gonna definitely be moving to everyday shows here very, very soon. Don't forget to check out the FTN bets where we have the conference tournament breakdowns. Those are rolling out each and every day. DFS breakdowns on FTN daily. Make sure you're in the Discord chatting with us. We're going to be breaking it down all day, talking about player pools, exposures, bets, news, all that good stuff. Thanks a lot, everybody. Best of luck tomorrow. See you all in the Discord. See you all on Twitter with the green screens. And I will be back Wednesday morning to cover another DFS slate. See ya.